Boom, we're recording. All right, so what's the first question? Is it me or I can't hear you? Or is no one speaking? Any questions? Can you hear me?
I have a question.
All right, Jessica. Good to see you again. All right,
I
good,
good to see
Jessica.
you again.
Let's
Uh,
what's up.
sure. Can you please talk a little bit about what you're gonna be asking in the exam for UNASUR?
Yeah, that's open space. So the first part of the class you might have noticed was on do they suspend sovereignty or not? The extent to which these international organizations work, etc. UNISOR was an interesting phenomena because what happens is it actually opens space for policies that otherwise wouldn't be considered. So you definitely want to know that for this one. And that will be on there. And that was the goal of it. It was actually closed down after because some of the governments didn't like it. But it was pretty positive and it helped decrease tension between Colombia and Venezuela, as well as a broad range of other issues. So yeah, it's definitely important. And that would be basically what it did. Good question to start off with. What else? What
Thank
else?
you.
Nothing?
I have another one.
All right, Jessica.
Uh, can you explain again the difference between sovereignty, compliance, and enforcement?
Well, excuse me. Those won't be differentiated on the exam specifically like that. But the way you need to know it, it's like, let me explain to you from the disenchanted approach is that when you create these high expectations, you might think IGOs, NGOs, etc., are bad. But in this case, it's actually not that bad if you take a disenchanted approach because the expectations are kind of high for these institutions. So that's a question. And that leads to the whole compliance, sovereignty, etc. That goes to the extent to which these IOs can affect international politics. So you take sovereignty, that's your rights. Compliance is the idea that people comply with certain policies. And then you have enforcement. To what extent can you enforce these policies? One of the things is there's a little incredulity in the extent to which bigger countries don't comply with the international system. And it's true because you're a big country. Why would you have to? I would say that smaller countries are much more inclined to listen to these international courts and organizations. In the case of Bolivia, Chile, and Peru, they were very, interested in the case brought into the International Court of Justice on whether or not Bolivia had the right to the sea because it lost it in a war in the 1800s to Chile. So these are taken very seriously. In one case, which will be on this exam, if you look at it, the example of Argentina and Ghana, Ghana did comply with the court that said you have to let the Argentinian military ship go, even though the United States wanted Ghana to hold the ship because Argentina owed the United States, the buitres, the vulture funds, money. So, to a certain degree, smaller states do follow international laws and organizations. The bigger states, China, Russia, the United States, UK, are much less inclined. So, that's something we have to understand in international law. And a lot of these times, these countries might know that the bigger countries won't follow the law, but they're writing their own history. This was the case, as you'll come up. Oh, I'll put this on the exam when Nicaragua took the United States to court in 1984 and won against an illegal war, it knew the United States wasn't going to stop, but it wanted this on the books to write its own history. So a lot of these international organizations and international legal systems, whether it's local or international, like the United Nations, ICJ, the criminal court, etc., are important to the extent to which it opens space for these alternative ideas. And if you can bring a country, even if it doesn't comply and there's no enforcement and it doesn't surrender its sovereignty, they do have the ability to write different types of history, set precedents, etc. So it's not all bad, if you know what I mean. It's not like we're going to hell. Well, we might be. What's going on with this election? Well, I'm not even going to ask about it. What else? Good questions. Anyone else have some good questions or follow-ups or something?
I do have a question regarding the European coal and steel community.
Yeah,
So, is the
I love that.
expectation that we only know about the ECSC, or do we need to know about how, after the treaties of Rome and Paris, it became the European communities, the
No,
treaty of
that gets into. I actually taught a course on the European Union. Don't ask me why. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I did want to stress this is just the idea that integrating coal and steel between states at that time, their argument would make war more difficult. What's interesting about it from my point of view is also it did work. I mean, if you go around Europe, it's very difficult to see that, France is going to have a war with Germany. So that integration began with coal and steel to integrate their just war machines. And then if you follow different theory, which won't be on this exam, it actually started to get the ball rolling and there were positive externalities. Once one area became integrated, another. Even now with the Brexit, it was so difficult because they were so intertwined. Even things like you wouldn't think about, like divorce and children and pensions, were all integrated into this system. It's pretty amazing, actually. So, in this case, what you'll need to know is that integrating these coal and steel war machines at that time, uh, the goal was to make war more difficult between the states. But then it started going on and deepening to such an extent that they became not one state. Never have they become one state. They jealously guard their foreign policy, etc. But that they became very much interlocked. It was probably the most successful system of integration ever. Good question. So it's just really the coal and steel question, answer, and that stuff. What else? Anything else, Chris?
Professor, can you go over the shrimp turtle case?
Yeah, that's a great case. That's an amazing case. It actually was in the Herd book that I didn't make you buy. It got a little expensive and data and all this stuff. But I do review it in the lecture. And what that does is it does show that the World Trade Organization favors. Now I don't know, you young kids are so obsessed with that climate change stuff. That it basically privileged trade over the environment. So are these organizations a little dated? Now that's something for you to debate. But the WTO has historically ruled for trade over the environment, and that's just a case that kind of illustrates that point. Turtles versus shrimp, basically. Good question. So that's like, in a nutshell, the answer. I mean, it's support over trade over the environment. I mean, shrimp over turtles or something like that. And that's why I said the book. The book in that case is the Herd book, which I actually put up a few book chapters. Probably people don't read it, but I talk about it in the lecture. What else?
Could you go over the Nuremberg trials?
Yeah, the Nuremberg trials are interesting, because that's what set the tone for much later, the ICC. The International Criminal Court is amazing, and what's amazing about it is the United States won't be part of it. But I find it fascinating because the Nuremberg, obviously the Holocaust, etc., was so brutal and horrible that the international system had to come together and do something. So then we have the ICC. I will allow you to debate the extent to which the ICC works, but that was basically what they were thinking of with the ICC, war criminals. The problem is you have to be a defeated state to go. We're going to talk about that more later. To what extent does the ICC work? Is it just geared towards developing countries? that becomes the issue. Should people of higher countries like Putin's never going to go to the ICC, neither is Netanyahu, neither is the Bush or anyone else. So it's an interesting phenomena that how it started out was kind of based on these Nuremberg trials. Good question. What else? What else?
Can you also go over the girl selling water?
Yeah, that's great. I took that picture. I don't know if it's great, but well, anything I do is great. Let's face it. All right, until you write the evaluations, and he's not that great. But I saw that girl over and over again when I was walking through Nicaragua, and she would sell food and stuff like that, after school, whatever. The United Nations initially said, oh, they took the more developed Western approach and said this has to be illegal. But when they made it illegal, there was a lot of struggles because people fell into poverty. The United Nations and other institutions no longer want to make child labor illegal. They want it regulated. Like, so you can work, but you have to go to school. That was the point of that photo. So in the developing world, a lot of kids have to work. I know it sounds sad, but this is how it is. And realistically speaking, they have to, or their families will fall into poverty. So they were nervous about continuing the illegal approach and recognize that they had to take a more realistic approach and say, look, you know, we're going to regulate international, make it illegal. Because now it's not illegal by international standards. It is and it isn't, kind of things like that. Because they recognize that they need flexibility on that. Excellent question. Whew. That it? Nothing?
I do have a question regarding discourse. Is that related to the concept of space and how space allows for discourse?
No, but that would be a good question too. This is about genocide, where discourse matters in international relations law organizations. So you take the Rwandan case, which will be the case we talk about, and that's genocide. So discourse in and of itself, oh, and it was brought up in the midterm, is based on the idea of how you define things, right? So, oh, I'll put this on the exam, something like this, since we're having a big election. Is a person an immigrant, right? Is an immigrant a refugee or quote unquote illegal, right? Like if you're very conservative, say the illegals. That word in and of itself defines how international and domestic institutions treat people. Same thing with, oh, this will be a good question, discourse with genocide. In Rwanda, you people are probably too young or not even born to remember, but there was genocide, but they refrained from saying genocide because then when you say genocide, you have to basically act. And that gets into, like, if you take my class with Myanmar and other things, like, is Myanmar committing genocide? Then we have to act. Very difficult situation. So discourse matters. And the reason I brought that up is I want to start talking about that now before we get into well, now we are in this week, into the thick book if you bought it. Or don't tell anyone I said it, found it online. But don't tell anyone I said that. I'm not supposed to say that. But these books are so expensive. They put kids, it's you got to mortgage your house to buy these books. You might be able to find it online. Did that answer it?
It did. Thank you.
Discourse matters. What else? What else?
Can you also go over the Central American Court of Justice?
That is the first court ever, and you were supposed to read the article. And it's a brilliant article because I wrote it, although not that brilliant. That was the very first court that was developed locally and to which all member states would suspend its sovereignty. And it worked for a while. If you go through that article and read the article, it addressed really important cases in international law, generally speaking, although there were local issues with Central America, like Law of the Sea, territory, etc. So that was the first court. And the poor Central Americans, they never get any respect, never get any kind of credit for it, but they were the ones that really were big with the court system and international law. So when we ask the question, do international organizations work? It depends. That's why I like the disenchanted approach. It's like, don't have too many high hopes, right? It's like, being married. I always say, don't have too many high, don't be too demanding, but it's okay, it opens space to kind of seeing that there are successes with these international organizations. Good point. And another success, it was more of an ad hoc, was when you read South-South relations, the Cuba-Colombia case study showed that Cuba-Colombia relations kind of opened up this space to end the Colombian Civil War. I'm not going to get into all the mechanisms, but it was a very successful relations with a conservative Colombian president, Santos, and Cuba, which obviously is not conservative, it's communist, where the FARC members could go to Cuba. Cuba had a modicum amount of political capital with the FARC. The FARC was able to be taken out of the country so they didn't wreak any more havoc. That's the guerrilla group in Colombia. And it was a very successful organization, kind of ad hoc relationship between Cuba and Colombia. Very good. So that'll be on there. What else?
For the question, why is the International Criminal Court under attack? Just to make sure I understand, it's under attack because like it's like it lacks like the authority to like actually follow through with the stuff that it's prosecuting.
Right. Did
Is
you
that,
people?
is that
I don't mean to cut you off. Did you watch the video on it?
yeah, the
Good.
BBC one.
Yeah, it's part. Yeah, that is definitely it. There's really little enforcement, but also more importantly than that, it's powerful countries such as the United States fail to be part of the court. That's one of the biggest things is that bigger countries are like, we won't. I mean, the United States, it's like the League of Nations, right? The United States pushed for it, and then when it came, like we don't want to be part of it. It's the ICC is a huge problem that the United States fails to be a part of the court.
But even if they're a part of the court, there's nothing that says that they have to follow the rules anyway. So
Right.
does that mean like it's like the justice, whatever justice they're delivering is it like meaningless because they just don't have the power to enforce it?
I don't know meaningless because people have been taking Charles Taylor, Milosevic, people like that. But you're right in a certain degree where it's like, okay, this is just for developing countries, so what's the point, right? Putin's never going to go. Is Putin a war criminal? That's for another debate. But if he is, and they find it, he's probably not going to go. So does it do something for developing countries? Does it, make them stay in check or something like that? That is, they do fear it. I don't know. That's the intrinsic debate.
And then does that go on to the other point that like it's like there are instances where like they're accused of like being solely focusing on like developing countries. Like I think there was like a section in the YouTube video that was talking about like countries in Africa and the fact that like they might like they're more harsh or like they're often really like solely focused on those kinds of like smaller like kind of like POC countries.
Yeah, 100%. It's only focuses on these kinds of smaller countries because they're weaker states. It's easy to go after the, weaker states. Like no one's gonna put, say, George Bush in prison or Clinton for bombing the Sudan or anything else. So yes, it is a world of hierarchical order, which I'm not a big fan of, but that's true.
Okay, thank you.
What else do we got here? We did Nuremberg. Why? I did talk about, yeah, the compliance enforcement. The one thing I want you to take away, which I talked about this, it does open space to write different histories as well. Like let's just say the Ukraine does open up a ruling against Russia. Sure, Putin might not go to the ICC or might not follow the rulings of the ICJ, but it does open up that space to write a different history. You know what I mean? That becomes legal. So even though someone might not go to prison, you're still writing that. That's what the whole point of the Nicaraguan International Court of Justice case against the United States was. They wanted it on the books. So it's not the end of the world. And as far as Africa goes, the other thing is that coup Niger, the point of that lecture was to show that, the background and all that stuff is, we failed to support democracy. You saw Barack Obama with the most brutal African dictator, Equatorial Guinea, because they have oil. So when it comes to these bigger powers, the idea is, and that's any ideology, anything, Russia, United States, UK, Iran, where especially now with the new Cold War, that's my opinion, they're really looking for alliances more so. So like democracy always takes a second seat, or for I don't want to just say alliances, but also mineral wealth, etc. What else do we have here? What else? Ooh, that's good. The Nuremberg trials, Cuba and Colombia relations, girls selling water, definitely. The whole sovereignty compliance enforcement refers to the extent to which these IGOs can do things. Oh, did you watch the thing on the Colombian peace process? Collected weapons. That was my example in one of the lectures, was that, one of the positive aspects of the United Nations was that it actually collected weapons during the Colombian peace process. We just had a debate in my political violence course. I sometimes give that online. I sometimes give it in class. This time I'm giving it in class. And we debated the extent to which the United Nations can be useful. One of the issues with the United Nations, it is what we have. So it did help Colombia, even though Cuba and Colombia went into those relationships, it did help them collect the weapons. There was no other organization that would be able to do that, in my opinion. So that was one of the reasons I put the Colombian peace process on there, because I used it as an example during the lecture as a useful utility of the United Nations. And I did want to talk about the backlash of privatization of Bolivian water, was an example I used, where there was a backlash against the World Bank and IMF. So if you notice at the beginning of this class, a lot is on organizations, the good, the bad, and the ugly. On the one hand, I'm stressing some good things of the United Nations, like the ability to handle collecting weapons from the former guerrilla group FARC, who was trying to overthrow the government. When a government, like, and a guerrilla group, those are insurrectionists, whatever you want to call them, non-state actors, are fighting, you need someone to collect the weapons of the non-state actor. In this case, they're called the FARC. That's a guerrilla group, kind of an insurrection group. It became very powerful in Colombia. So the United Nations is one of the only international organizations to do that. So there's positive stuff, but there's also a lot of negative, like the IMF and the World Bank. Do bigger countries follow the ICC? Things like that. So it's kind of a mixed bag of good, bad, and the ugly. The ugly, like, does the WTO even care about the environment? So there's a lot of space there for good, but then there's a lot of backlash and other problems as well. Good questions. Any other questions? That's like the exam 18 questions. Oh, I think Article 51 is on there. The point of Article 51, I enjoyed hearing your arguments, is like, to what extent does a state have the right to self-defense? Israel saying, it has the right to self-defense, but is what it's doing goes way beyond the right to self-defense. I'll let you people debate that. Anyways, but that's going to be a key article when we start getting into the international law. And you should read, if you are interested in studying law, you should read the book, because reading those dense, boring cases is part of law school if you want to go to law school. How many people here are going to go to law school? All right.
I intend to.
All right, Bryce. So you better read that book because law school's pretty grueling. You can't even work the first year, I believe. That's in the contract.
I
What?
have a question about something that you said about, so you mentioned the good about the UN, like how they handled collecting weapons from the guerrilla group, but some of the bad is the IMF and the World Bank. Could you go into like a little, like explain a little bit more about that?
Well, I think the IMF and World Bank are usually run by technocrats and don't really, feel the pain of a lot of people. So a good example is when the World Bank was telling Brazil under Dilma or a former president, it's okay to raise the bus prices. But yet when you raise bus prices, and when I lived in Nicaragua and other countries, I noticed this, a lot of people go, under the table for poverty. So one of the problems with the World Bank and IMF is a lot of the policies, the people working in the IMF and World Bank don't feel the pain of these policies. They're just interested in, what's on the papers. Oh, this will balance the budget or something. But by balancing the budget, you sometimes have worse issues because then people stop protesting and go crazy, etc. Bolivia is a great example. When the World Bank and IMF supported privatizing water all of a sudden became unattainable for people. And Bechtel, I believe it was the organization. They wanted to make it illegal for even Bolivians to collect rainwater. So, like, a lot of the policies the IMF, World Bank, etc. support so often they do not, and I actually did some work for them because teaching them things, and they live in high, in nice hotels and everything else, so they don't feel the pain. Moreover, I wrote an article a long time ago in a Nicaraguan newspaper criticizing the World Bank and the IMF, and they actually called my house and told me I didn't have the right to publish. So it's like, that's crazy. I go, I thought it was a free world. They're like, no, you got to talk to us first. I go, no, I think I can publish what I want. This is Latin America. I was in Latin America. So the point is that a lot of these are very kind of the elitist type, authoritarian type people who never feel the pain of a lot of their policies. The United Nations is a mixed bag. It can do good things. It can do awful things. There's people who participate in the United Nations and then are found to be, having, sorry for the sad subject, but sexual assault, minors. I used to give this um, documentary, Frontline on the United Nations about the issues of abuse in the United Nations, and students were freaking out. They couldn't even watch it. So I kind of withdrew that from my political violence course. But so there's a lot of good and a lot of bad out there. We could talk about this for hours. But thanks for the question.
Does the Bolivia privatization of water, is that the keyword list? Is that what that's referring to, or
Yes.
is there
I bring
like
it up
another?
in one of the videos. I
Okay.
know the videos can be dense and all that stuff. That's why I send out the keyword list. Remember, yeah, that is exactly the question, the answer, the backlash against this kind of privatization of water. So in this midterm exam, I can open it tomorrow or tonight, whenever it's easy for you. That'll be open for like 5 days or something. And it is 1 point each opposed to 0.5. Now, a lot of people don't like these, what do you call them, multiple choice exams. But like Bryce said, if you want to go to law school, then you have to take the LSAT, which is predominantly multiple choice and all these other things. So you got, and the GMAT, the GRE, etc., foreign service exam, all multiple choice exams until you get to the essay part and interview. So it's good to get used to these kind of exams anyways. Any other question?
I have one regarding something that's not quite on the list, but it does say anything mentioned. Are we going to be expected to remember the Slovak Republic's imposition of restrictions on Ukrainian wheat as part of the midterm or anything like that?
Did we talk about that here?
It was for the WTO.
Oh yeah, no, anything like that we talked about here. I don't think I mentioned the wheat in this midterm, but like I'll be honest with you, something that could come up is like the discourse part with Rwanda and genocide. The Nicaraguan International Court is very important because I live there and they talked about it all the time. So like, but that opens space. So it's trying to give more a positive view on something that's not always viewed as possible, like positive. The ICJ, the International Criminal Court, a lot of times they don't focus on it. So the Nicaraguan case is perfect example where a small country did beat a larger country and now it's part of history. So that's very, very important. Good question, Bryce, in that one, because it's like, what else will be on this in addition? But there's only 18 questions. There are people start freaking out, oh, my, cat is sick. I missed a discussion board. Don't worry, quiz. Don't worry too much about that. What you want to kind of focus on is getting as many points as possible. If you miss points, it's not the end of the world. Because my course is, did anyone who took my national security course? One semester I had like 25 extra points. That was way too much. So, but anyways, there are a good amount of points to cover these kinds of errors. Like I know people start getting kind of upset when I say, well, I can't do anything if you were sick, I had the COVID, because that's what the extra points are for. So that's what I wanted to also say. Make sure you watch that lecture on the point structure. Anything else? Questions, comments? I'll put in a couple extra lectures after, but I'm waiting to see who wins. Will we know even before the end of this class? I don't know. There's going to be a lot of heart attacks in the next couple days, so don't get sick because there will be no ambulances. People are really freaking out over this election. Any questions or comments about the election? I know who's going to win, so I don't want to share it with you people. Nothing? All right. Any questions? I'm kidding. I don't know who's going to win. I have no idea. No one does. This is crazy. Are you people excited for the election or not?
Looking forward to end.
All right. To end. All right. There you go. Any questions on the, sorry, Bryce.
I have a question on the paper, so I
let
don't know if you
Bryce
can
go.
jump.
Jessica, let Bryce go because I think
It was just a comment. It's okay.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm excited for the election season to end also.
Oh, okay. So you're reverberating. Yeah, that's what I was also going to ask before we leave. Are there any questions about the final paper? Go ahead, Jessica.
No, I just wanted to ask you, what are you expecting from us in terms of the paper, and if you could also give us some ideas for the final paper.
I don't give ideas actually because I want you to do something that you like. You have to pick a case and analyze it. Analyzing the case will be a few things. Number one, what were the results, what were the arguments, etc. You could also, if you want to be like a seasoned lawyer, start talking about the case in the sense that what did they fail to do, what did they do correct, was the ruling correct, etc. Can be any case, and it might not even be a case, it could be more of a conflict that you yourselves think should be taken to the International Court of Justice, and then you make it. The most important thing about this final paper, if you want to go to law school, like Bryce said, or anyone else here, or anyone who's not here and you're interested in going to law school, you might want to think about doing a very good paper and then going to the writing lab. You don't have to be here in Arizona to do it. You can send it to them, getting it checked, and then submitting that with your law application. They do expect a paper. So one of the things I do, particularly in my professional development course, is I speak with the students about, getting that best paper they can get, right? The best paper to submit with their portfolio. So nowadays, it's not just about recommendations and resumes, but you need a quote unquote portfolio. There, you need a paper, sample paper. So start thinking about something that really, you really like, you're passionate about, put in. Now, let's say you're not going to law school, but you might still need a paper for an internship, graduate school, etc. So start thinking about, you could use this class or any other class you take with me for an example paper or sample paper, but it serves as an example of what you're doing. So you want to think like that. But you can do any case. I mean, just Google cases when we start reading that book or listening to lectures. reading more. You can definitely, there's a ton of stuff you could do. So I don't want to tell you, oh, do this, because I might like this, like Bolivia versus Chile, but you might be not interested in something like that. But there are a lot of good cases out there. So that's what you're going to do. It's kind of a case study of a case or a possible case that you think should be taken to the International Court of Justice, ICC, etc. Any other question?
To build off of the expectations for the essay, am I able to structure it like issue, ruling, analysis, and conclusion, but build it out more amply?
You can do what you want. There's many roads to Rome. I use your own judgment on how to set it up. Because the goal here is to do something utilitarian, not just, oh, placate the professor. Try to do something that you can use in your portfolio and what you think is kind of the correct setup. You could do a 5-paragraph theme type paper. You could do, something with a great grabber at the beginning. There are so many different ways to do it that you're going to do it the way you think is correct. And you can be creative too. People like creative stuff.
Okay, I was thinking about maybe structuring it after like a legal brief.
Yeah, you could definitely do that and then put it in unless you have another one, then you could put it in your
I have
portfolio.
a couple, so I'll add it in with it.
Yeah, that's it. You choose one to pick. You choose the best one when you go to law school. And that goes for all the people who want internships, jobs, etc. Any other questions?
I have
Um,
two.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Whoever wants to go first. I don't. Oh, look at the little hand thing is up here down here now. Did someone raise their hand? Someone raise their hand. I got to see something. Anyone, raise your hand. Ah, there it is. It's up here now. But then I saw it down here. See, the reason I'm late was because I had to update Zoom. Now Zoom looks a little different. Okay, go ahead, Salma. Did you have something or did you just do that?
Yeah, I have sort of like a two-parter question. One is about the final paper. Is it due like December 6th, like end of the class, or is there like an
Yeah,
earlier due date that you'd
you
like?
can you can pass it when you want. I didn't open it yet, but like I didn't open up the midterm, but you can get it any time. But yeah, the last day of class is when it's due.
Okay. And my second question is regarding one of the key words, the who writes history. Is that like the kind of thing where it's like the bigger countries who like are able to?
Who writes history it's usually the bigger countries, but that's where these international court of justice rulings, smaller countries get an opportunity to make their case, even if there's no enforcement, compliance, and submission of sovereignty. Do you understand?
Yeah, so is the answer to that like it just depends on who wins the case, or like
Yeah,
it depends on?
it's the case itself. Because let's say in the case of Nicaragua, I'll use that as an example on the midterm then. Nicaragua is the poorest country in Latin America after Haiti, right? It's got an illegal war by the United States in the 1980s. It brings the United States to court, the ICJ, and it wins, right? You'd have to read the dense, legalese to it, but it won. It won the case against the United States. The United States says, oh, we don't recognize the case. But the fact that that Nicaragua won the case against the United States is where it opens space to rewrite history.
Okay, so is it kind of like who rewrites history or who writes history
Right.
to
A
begin with?
smaller country can use the ICJ and other organizations to challenge the history written by the bigger powers.
Got it. Okay.
So I know I understand what you're saying because it's like usually history is written by the winner, history is written by powerful people, etc. This tries to rethink that by using these organizations, obviously the ICJ, International Criminal Court, as being the biggest, to rewrite history. So even if Russia destroys the Ukraine, whatever, can the Ukraine still, find through the International Court of Justice a level of justice in history by beating Russia in the International Court of Justice, that Putin is a war criminal, for example. Good.
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
I had a question about the debates.
Yeah.
If you aren't signed up for a particular debate, but maybe you want you're if you're interested in a different debate too,
Yeah, you can change.
which?
Yeah, I don't care. I mean, what? No, I mean, what do I care? You know what I mean? It's like you can do it.
Thank you.
And as I said, there's more flexibility on the debates than other things because, if you don't get in on a Sunday, you get a Monday, Tuesday, it's not that big of a deal. But you got to do it. Anything else? Nothing? Well, the next time we speak, we might be in civil war. We don't know. So, good luck tomorrow and Wednesday. How many people think we're going to know the results tomorrow? Wednesday?
I hope we do, but I'm not sure.
Will there be violence?
I hope not.
think-
I truly hope not.
I live near DC, so who knows?
Really? Wow, you should go.
Be safe.
Yeah, stay safe. This is crazy. I mean, I just voted today. I dropped my little thing off at ASU. But yeah, I mean, good luck on the exam. I went over it. It's 18 points. It's a good amount of points. 1 point each, all just multiple choice. There's so many students in the course that, I can't do like fill in the blank because if you spell something wrong, it's like then everyone it's like, what happened? What happened? So yeah, good luck and good luck tomorrow and stay safe during this election. This is crazy. I'm gonna make some other lectures related, particularly whoever wins this election. I think it'll be Jill Stein. Will they be better for international law and organization? So we're gonna talk about that. Anything else? Any questions or comments?
I'm sorry, I had one last
Yeah, this is
question just
go
based off
ahead,
of what you
Summer.
just said. I noticed you sent out an announcement recently saying that you sent out like the other half of the discussions, like the lectures.
Yeah, all the
Does that mean
modules are open.
yeah, is that like all the assignments that we'll have to do, or
Yeah,
will
I
there be like an
might,
additional?
but what my point was too was like I might put up a couple extra lectures, then there would be a discussion board. But anything I put up now is extra, so it's just in the favor of the students because there's already over 100 points in
Got it.
the
Okay.
whole system. The thing is, not everything's published. Like the quizzes aren't published, and the final isn't published, and the final. So you don't see all those points after, but it'll be well over 100. So if I do a lecture after this election on whether Kamala Harris or Trump or Jill Stein or Cornel West, whoever wins, and we even have a libertarian candidate that might pull it off. Whoever wins, what you people think, a nice, cute, cool lecture with what you think will happen with the international system after this person wins. So, but that would also be extra points because there's already 100 points, if you know what I mean. So anything over 100 is extra. So if there's 120 points, there's 20 points extra, 115, there's 15 points extra, etc.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out. I mean, not too bad. 10 or 11 out of 200. That's not too bad. People are working, they're busy, etc. So, thanks everyone for taking it and take care and keep me posted on this election thing. I think I might ignore it for the next week.
Thank you, Professor.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
If you're interested, I could get a paper copy of the Washington Post and send you a photo
Of what?
on Wednesday morning of the headline they run.
I don't know. I think it's gonna be we don't know who wins, but we're gonna see. Thanks though, right? Take care, everyone.